One of my hobbies is collecting and customizing ball-jointed dolls. It's kind of a snobby community, so I stick to myself. Though, my dolls creep out others, but I've never had any paranormal issues with them. I mostly bought them new, and nothing has been attached. That is only one of my doll-related hobbies. I also enjoy going to used stores and looking at knickknacks where I have found some pretty cool old little dolls. On one trip, I went to Value Village and headed straight to the back where all of the little items were bagged because that's where the good deals are. Scanning the wall, one of the baggies caught my eye. There were 5 little dolls in it. There were these little crocheted ones with buttons for faces, 2 rubber Hansel and Gretel looking ones. Then this clown doll, which seemed out of place. I only wanted the 4 dolls. Not really a fan of clowns. It was only $3 for the 5 of them, and I figured I would give away the clown when I got home. When something is attached to something, I can physically feel it when I touch it. It's almost like there's this bubble around the item that my hand passes through. I got a flash of color and anxiety shoots up my arm, then my chest. It feels like a lump of anxiousness just sitting there. At that point, I knew there was something attached to one of them and decided to bring them home. One by one, I picked up each doll. They all had a little something attached, but when I got to the clown, it was really strong. I took a picture of her and started asking if anyone wanted her. No one wanted to take her. Everyone told me to just donate her back. Weird things had already been happening around my house, so I figured there was no harm in waiting to get rid of the little doll. I'm not sure what is attached to the doll, but it's very angry and loud. It bangs on the wall, the doors, shelves, and I haven't slept properly in ages. I keep the lights on because it seems to help. It harassed me every night and eventually I got sick of it. One night, it crept up beside my bed, hitting it from underneath. I opened my eyes from a deep sleep, leaned towards it and yelled, "Screw off!" It must have been pretty startled because ever since then it hasn't been as bad. If it's dark, it'll start banging around. Not as loud as it used to be though. It used to hide in my closet, but has since moved to the basement, in the corner of the laundry room and watches from behind the furnace. People have told me to get rid of it, but as long as it's behaving, I honestly don't mind it being here. I ignored it for a while, but maybe it's time to communicate and see what it wants. I'm a Native American from a reservation in Michigan. In my younger years, me and my close friend, I will call her M, decided to go back to our roots and get some snares. And in the northern Michigan winter, there is snow and cold. This was so long ago, however, I remember we wanted to utilize not only the meat for dinner, but the hide for regalia. We decided to go south into a swampy area that had cedar and pines. We were looking for pathways the rabbits used to set the snares when we noticed a clearing that seemed to have no snow. We both agreed to proceed towards what we saw. We both were getting creepy vibes as we approached the site, and when I entered the circle I saw jars with things in all around them. The freakiest thing was in the middle of this was a tree, which upon the vines grew toward the ground. Then, there in the fork of this tree was a doll, arms raised. The trees seemed to make a natural cove around this place, and I just wanted to get out of there. I had extreme butterflies and wanted to bolt. I and M didn't touch anything and proceeded home as fast as we could through the snow without shoes. After we reached my grandparents, we told my grandmother what had happened, and she called our cousin who was in the tribal police force. We told everything to him after he showed up, and he said he would take care of it. I tried to forget about it, and after he retired from the force, I decided to ask what had happened, and if he indeed saw what I and M saw. All he mentioned was he did indeed see what we had described, also that they emptied the jars and dismantled the site. I wanted to know what was in the jars. and I pushed all I could, but he would not say. I don't remember or leave it be is all he would tell me. Call me A. M is a nurse in Virginia now, and my cousin, may he rest in peace now. Here where I live, I have experienced some weird things, but to me, this was the one that set a bit of fear into me when I was young. I wonder what that doll was for, and what all those jars were. When I was 10, my parents had bought me a Furby for my birthday. It only said the same 3 phrases, over and over again. 1. I'm hungry. 2. I'm tired. 3. I love you. After a couple of months of the Furby not being played with, it kept opening its eyes and moving places while I slept. One day, the batteries finally died, and all it did was make a brrr sound. After taking out the batteries, it continued to make noises, so I ran a bath and tossed the Furby in it to try to shut it up. Then I ran over to our microwave and threw the Furby in there to be cooked. As it was being melted, its eyes and mouth flew open as if it was in shock at what I had just did. So this next encounter is a little bit later in life. I was at my ex's house a few years ago. Her sister and her were talking over a few cigarettes. When I walk out, her nephew's Furby he had on the table opened its eyes and started talking about a dark island, and the Furbies lived there in fear of what hid in the dark trying to eat them. Freaked out, we looked at each other to see if it had any batteries. Upon opening it up, we noticed no batteries were even in it, as it continued to say it was in emotional pain and wanted to rescue its friends. I grabbed the Furby and smashed it on the ground. I went into her shed and grabbed a shovel to smash the Furby some more and bury it in the backyard. After that, I have never owned another Furby again. I don't know what was making it malfunction or if it was possessed or what, but honestly, it's one of the creepiest things that I've ever experienced. The story I'm about to relay happened about 15 years ago when I was 6, so some of the details might have slipped through the cracks. However, I doubt I'll ever forget it. Every other weekend, my dad would take me to my mom's house for dinner. She was a headstrong Italian that took a lot of pride in cooking for her family. It was so funny to me because she had a car she never drove, a computer she never used, and a wine cellar that's been untouched for as long as I can remember. She walked everywhere, even with her groceries in hand. Unfortunately, as a result, the rest of the house appeared to be frozen in time. It looked like it was stuck in the 70s, collecting dust in the areas she didn't feel that needed to be gone in. Some of the wallpaper was starting to peel, and the bedrooms of her kids were starting to smell musty. Don't get me wrong, my mom was a fantastic woman and was far more active than most women at her age, but the house was too big for her, so it was impossible for her to take care of each corner. My cousins and I used to explore the little nooks and crannies that she had forgotten about. During one of our little excursions into the cellar, my cousin Georgia pulled out a Ouija board from a pile of old magazines and newspapers. I didn't have the foggiest clue what it was, so when my cousins Georgia, Annie, and Jonathan all told me I would be able to speak to ghosts with it, I was floored. It sounded scary, but it also sounded too cool to pass up. Georgia decided to perform the seance in the creepiest room of the house, the doll room. The doll room, as we called it, had to have been the most out-of-place room in the house. When my mom bought the house, it came with a wardrobe, a dimly lit painting of a man, and a built-in shelf for dolls of various sizes. No matter how many times we wandered into that room, we could never understand why she had such a room. We turned the bedside lamp, set the board on the ground, and used a small glass cup in place of a planchette. Unsurprisingly, it was lost somewhere in the clutter, my cousins goofed around a little, pulling it around just to scare me. I remember growing a little frustrated and feeling stupid for believing that ghosts were even real. They laughed until we all heard the familiar sound of something rolling against wood. All three of them fell silent. Slowly we looked down at the cup. I could recall it once sat leisurely between the two letters, and now it sat firmly on the A. We exchanged baffled expressions for what felt like an eternity. I placed my hand on the glass, waiting for something to happen. Just when I was beginning to think it was somebody's foot knocking the glass around, I felt it jerking slightly to the right. I decided to push it in that general direction, thinking that something was trying to egg me on. My cousin started to snicker, thinking I was just pulling their legs. To this day, I argue with myself on whether it was just the power of suggestion or if something was really trying to contact me from the other side. I took my hand off the glass when we reached the letter L. Owl. We waited until we were content there wasn't going to be anything else following those two letters. Out of morbid curiosity, we asked Owl how he died. My cousins placed their fingers back on the cup. Because they did, I'm not sure if they were just messing with me or if it was real. The word followed was fire. I remember Georgia nervously laughing and saying, "Okay, owl that died in the fire, do you want to talk to us?" The lamp flickered almost a greenish glow for a split second, lighting the room as a lightning bolt would have. We were frozen in our spots. This could have just been a fluke. The house was ancient, and it wasn't like Mom was a master technician. Maybe the bulb was dying. Suddenly, Jonathan yelped, smacking his arm as if swatting at a mosquito. He insisted something shocked him. At that point, we decided to call quits. We put the Ouija board back where we found it. Since there was news articles littered throughout the cellar, my cousins thought it would be a good idea to play detective to see if anything was there about a fire. After a few minutes, we grew bored of searching and ran back upstairs to tell the adults what we had found. Some of the adults glanced at each other with mock surprise and patronizing glances. My dad and uncle, however, seemed genuinely curious. On the road home, my dad told me an interesting tale. Without a hint of his typical humor or goofiness, he told me about when he was about 12 years old, living in Mom's house with his brother and sisters. He recalled it was a hot summer night, so everyone, save for his sisters, had their doors open to help maintain air circulation. His sisters always kept their bedroom door shut because it was fairly noisy, and sometimes would slam it shut if a sudden draft would reach in. He laid on top of his blankets, watching the ceiling fan go around when his peripherals caught something move in his doorway. When he looked, he noticed a silhouette of someone peering around at his height, glancing in his room before making it down the hallway. At first, he thought it was his brother, since the silhouette was coming from the opposite direction of the bathroom. My dad thought he could bust his big brother for being out of bed. He slinked into the hallway and saw the figure dart around the corner towards his sister's shared bedroom. From there, his brother wouldn't be able to hide. He turned the corner only to be met with his sister's bedroom door. That was the first time he claimed that all the hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he suddenly felt very vulnerable. He turned around towards his brother's room and saw him sleeping right on top of his blankets. My dad didn't get any sleep that night. Up until that point, he never believed in ghosts. I'd be skeptical of his story if it wasn't for the fact that I could still hear the shock in his voice. My dad told me that the Ouija board could have been my cousins trying to scare me, but he also said he wouldn't doubt for a second if something was really trying to contact us.